You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Secret Origins comic book podcast, where I'm going to be going through the first appearance of John Corbin Metallo from way back in 1959. Doing this because Metallo is coming back strong in the current dawn of DC Superman storylines. Now, there are a couple different versions of Metallo, and even John Corbin has gone through various origins. We're going to talk about the John Corbin Metallo, who first appeared in the Superman comic strip storyline, The Menace of Metallo, with the first appearance in Action Comics number 252, which came out way back on March 31st, 1959. And Action Comics number 252 is a pretty big issue since it also contained the Otto Binder and Al Plastino story, The Supergirl from Krypton, which was the first appearance and origin of Supergirl. So that's a pretty big issue. Now, the story we're talking about, The Menace of Metallo, it was written by Robert Bernstein, pencils by Al Plastino, inks by Al Plastino, and edited by Mort Weisinger. Now, we start off with our introduction page, where usually they have something crazy on these pages, especially in the Silver Age. A lot of times it was the Super Dickery page, it was called, because the writers would try to fool you into, oh my God, this is a story where Superman kills Batman. This is a story where Jimmy Olsen ends up killing Superman. There's a lot of craziness. A lot of times in these first pages, Superman is acting like a complete jerk. He's treating everybody bad, and then you're, oh my God, what is this all about? And then you get in the story and realize, oh, that was kind of fake. That was a fake out. This is not a fake out, this first page. You end up seeing Lois and, who we'll find out is John Corbin, standing in the street while a gangster car goes by and does a little bit of a drive-by shooting. This isn't East Coast, West Coast rap war, but still, back in the day, drive-by shooting. As Superman flies in, he's surprised because this guy in a suit, mustache, really like an Errol Flynn type mustache, very cheesy. We'll find out John Corbin, he's deflecting bullets off of his chest. Lois, of course, immediately then assumes that John Corbin is Superman and falls completely in love with him. In the meantime, you get a narration that says, through the years, you have seen Superman locked in titanic battles with the most bizarre villains in history, but now he meets his newest foe, the most incredible and dangerous of them all, the Menace of Metallo. So how does this all come about? Well, we start on a summer night outside Metropolis where John Corbin, reporter, is tuning into some, what is now old-time radio, but back in the day, a radio program, Crime File. And so it basically, if you wanted to update this, he's listening to a true crime podcast here, and he's hearing the kind of crime where a guy thought that he had pretty much covered all his bases, but he never wiped off the gun. Oh my goodness, the fingerprints on the gun. This guy gets arrested. Case closed. Why this is important is because John Corbin, he has just committed a very similar crime. It's just thrown at you. He has killed somebody, and he not only is a smart reporter, but a smart criminal. He wiped the gun fingerprints off. He ends up where I did the perfect crime. I am great. I am going to get away with this. You never really find out a lot about this crime or what it was all about, but we set it up. Bad guy. He's driving and he is going down this looks like a mountain type road. He ends up going around a corner, loses control, and he crashes his car. Now, in the meantime, you kind of sit there and like, well, it serves you right. You know, karma's a bitch there, John Corbin. But lucky for him, maybe, you end up having another car come upon the scene. And it is an old man and an old lady. You end up finding out that the old man is a professor, Professor Vale. He gets out and they run to the wreckage and they end up checking, oh my God, this guy is very badly injured. There's an old lady as well who is the housekeeper for Professor Vale. Now, at this point, you would hope they call an ambulance. They end up, or, you know, in a comic booky way, this happens to be a doctor. No, he is just a professor who seems to like to experiment on human bodies. And even with him being so sus, you end up having this Edith, the housekeeper, who seems to be kind of, a little bit wary of it, but she'll just go along with it because probably she'll end up as an experiment as well. But really, the start of this ends up John Corbin, reporter and murderer, crashes, and then the sussest of sus professors comes by and says, oh, this is something that he tries to make it seem like he has to do this. The only thing that I can do is what I do, and what I do is turn people into giant metal men. And so that's what he does. He ends up taking the body back to his lab. It looks classic sci-fi lab, including having like this big ray gun type thing that they don't really use, but it always makes me laugh. And he ends up changing up John Corbin's body to be just a metal man. He is completely made of metal. When he wakes up, he's amazed. Oh my God, you saved my life. Thanks so much, Professor. Thank you so much. And Professor Vale says, well, don't thank me until you see exactly what I've done. And he ends up taking, off this nightshirt that he's wearing. And indeed, he is just made of metal. And it goes as far as Professor Vale showing an X-ray of John's arm, and it's metal. He says that I made a synthetic rubber skin to cover up all the metal so people don't think that, you're a monstrosity. But in the meantime, you have this big open chest that you have to open up this door, and you need to keep supplying your heart with uranium. Now, that doesn't go with what we're usually used to, but you do end up having Professor Vale say, uranium you're going to have to replenish each day. But there's something else that might fuel your heart, and I'll let you know what that is right about now. Oh no, there's a landslide outside that ends up where a bunch of boulders come down and hit the lab, and it doesn't end up killing Professor Vale. In fact, it just kind of hits the building, but all of that ruckus ends up having Professor Vale has a stroke. He ends up just falling over, face plants, boom. And John Corbin goes over to him and is like, oh my God, he's had a stroke. But the hell with that, I'm getting out of here. Now, it was right at that point, again, the professor was about to tell John the idea of kryptonite being able to fuel this heart and wouldn't need to be changed every day. But John doesn't know this yet. He just knows he needs uranium. He ends up leaving the professor, leaving him for dead, and pretty much opens the door and punches his way out of all the rocks from this landslide. And he realizes, oh my God, I'm really strong. I am so strong that I think that I could change my whole life around to a life of crime. He is the idea where he needs uranium, so he is going to go on a full-out crime spree to try to get uranium, or he'll die. I mean, you can't really blame him that much about it. And at this point, I think that maybe, and there's a couple times, Professor Vale, maybe he could have, made sure that John would survive, but then take him to a hospital. So at this point, maybe John Corbin should go to authorities and kind of say, look at what happened. Oh my God, this sus professor who just had a stroke, he turned me into a metal man. I don't know, but instead he decides, I'm just going to work with this. And he ends up going and applying for a job at the Daily Planet. There's a lot of things that just happen. I mean, the idea that he's now Metallo, the metal man, but then he still has to have a job. So he applies, and you end up, Perry gives him a job. And so he brings him out to talk to all the other reporters, basically just Lois and Clark. And Clark comes over, goes to shake hands with John Corbin, and John Corbin legitimately seems to try to break Clark's hand. He ends up squeezing, pleased to meet you, Mr. Kent. And you end up having Clark, he has to pretend that this hurt, but he says, golly, what a grip. He's got a hand of iron. I had to pretend his strong grip hurt me, or he'd guess I'm Superman. But why is John Corbin doing this stuff? Why is he there greeting a fellow reporter, knows nothing about Clark Kent, and pretty much tries to break his hand to the point where Clark has to pretend that, oh man, that hurt. So then you end up where John goes over to Lois and gets completely sus. He is not woke. That's clearly the case, because he grabs on to Lois and will not let go. And she ends up saying, sorry, I'm not hungry, because he goes, hey, I go for you, baby. You're a cute number. How about lunch? Standard pickup lines in 1959, and probably would work a lot of times, but not with Lois. Lois ain't going for that. And she says, oh my God, and I love the idea back in the day, and I wish this was something that they did more of now, where Lois, she's cold as ice here. She doesn't like John Corbin, so her word bubble is frozen. It seems like it's just ice and frozen and snow, and she says, sorry, I'm not hungry. Now remove the grip of iron. I don't like it any more than Clark did. And you end up, John Corbin, all right, well, this sucks. I thought I was going to get a date. But in the meantime, I kind of need to find some uranium. And almost the idea that he seems to think that the Daily Planet would get a lot of stories coming out about uranium, which they kind of do, but it makes no sense. But the idea he'll know what is what. So he says, I need some uranium by tomorrow or I'm done. I got to get it fast. Suddenly, you end up having a story come over the wire that a nuclear atomic submarine, the submarine Neptune, is in distress. Now, right away, you're thinking, all right, how is this going to play? Because the submarine is actually trying to make the staying submerged record. They're only 3 days away, and they're going to end up, their air system kind of broke. There's air is running out. They're going to have to surface. So it's almost the idea the story isn't that the submarine is in peril. They're only in peril of not being in the world records book. So they're all upset. Everybody seems to be into this. Oh, those poor sailors, they're not going to get the record. Well, Clark hears this. You think in your mind, though, that, okay, nuclear sub, uranium. All right, this is going to be where John Corbin goes. But how could he? He's not a superhero type guy. Now, we're not sure at this moment if he has to breathe underwater or anything. It's played out that he has a metal body with his human brain kind of implanted by Professor Vale. But you don't know any, and that's not what happens. It's a weird play that this is just to get Clark to get into the Superman deal and go off to save the sub to let there be some room for John Corbin to go and steal uranium around town because, that's just laying around town. Well, Superman goes off, and I do like from back in the day that he runs into the storage room. He changes into his Superman costume, but in that he also grabs his Clark Kent clothes, and he pushes them and compacts them into a ball and then inserts them in his cape in a little thing. So he has those. I actually like that from back in the day. But what happens then is Superman goes off. He finds the sub. He ends up right before he goes underwater. He draws a real deep breath. Hopefully he hasn't eaten a lot of garlic or something recently. Hopefully he's brushed his teeth. And everything is, kosher there because he goes down and runs up to one of the, submarine ports there where they end up having the torpedo hatch, and he blows air into there. He just blows air and says that's enough air for 100 men for 6 days. And then you end up seeing inside the sub where at first it looks like this guy might have been hit with helium or he can't stand the smell of the halitosis from Superman's breath, but it's actually, he's cheering. Oh, that's Superman. He did it. We don't have to surface. We're going to get that world record, boys. Take that, you commies. I don't know why this is that important, but they're going to be able to beat the submerged record. All right. So we go back to Metropolis, and while this is going on, there is John Corbin, not dressed up as anything crazy. He's just in his suit and tie, and he's going around, and he's stealing uranium. It's starting a trend here where John Corbin, he doesn't like using doors. He doesn't like at points he just runs through walls to get to places. He doesn't like opening safes. He doesn't like opening desks. He smashes everything. It is John Corbin's smash. And in a way where he bragged earlier about being this great criminal, perfect crime stuff, he is leaving such a trail here. He is there. Okay, there's a door there, but no, I'm going to go through this wall at the Metropolis Research Laboratory, and I'm going to grab this uranium that at this point is just sitting on the shelf in a box. Troubles, right? So he grabs that. Then he goes to the hospital. Then he goes to the Science Institute. Then he goes to the U.S. Army Project X4 with the Keep Out sign. He doesn't listen. He goes right in. grabs all this uranium. Now, in that uranium, these boxes do look like they're almost like laundry detergent boxes, but at least somebody was, forthwithal to put danger on it. They ended up realizing there's danger of this uranium in this laundry detergent box. So we'll let people know. But he grabs all this uranium. It's enough uranium for a little bit, but it's still not going to be enough, forever. And there is that nagging deal of what was the professor talking about? This other power source that I can use that I will not have to replenish this way. Because eventually you're going to run out of uranium. You're going to run out of places you can go. And even John Corbin, as he does this, says, I got to do all of these in a row, because the minute that they realize that somebody is stealing uranium, they're going to lock the stuff down. It's going to get harder and harder for me to end up getting it. So he has some for now, but he's got to figure out a plan. Now, we end up, because of his, path of destruction, they are on it. You even have the media. They are announcing and naming him that this is Metallo, the Metal Man, public enemy number one. He is a robot, and he's stealing uranium. Now, in that, I don't really know how they really get this idea, especially even if they saw him. He's got that skin around him. It's very odd, but they go with it. They announce it, and you end up having John, Lois, and Clark in the Daily Planet listening to this report. And, they're doing some stories on it as well. But then you get this crazy story that comes over. Oh, my God, this just in. The big actress, Sherry Blair, has just announced that she's going to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel so that Superman saves her from, death. And you end up with Clark there hearing that. And he's like, oh, God, what is going on here? This is nonsense. These people keep doing stuff like this. He is pissed, but he's got to go. If he doesn't go, this Sherry Blair will die. Not many people survive going over the falls in a barrel, so he has to do it. In the meantime, he's already trying to figure out, I got to do this, but I can't let it be known that I'm saving her, because then I'm never going to get away from this stuff. This is going to happen all the time. Well, when Clark leaves, he does mention, hey, Lois, I'm going to have to go. My stomach hurts. It's those pickles I ate. Of course, Lois, there to be Lois, says, I ate those pickles too, Clark. Why are they affecting you? You weak stomach jerk. And he's like, I don't know. Oh, my God. He runs off because he has diarrhea. So he runs off. But he also says, I'm worried about you, Lois. You end up having this problem because you just exposed this criminal gang, and they might come and shoot you. That's where we get that beginning page. So she's there. But at that point, she doesn't care about anything except for making eyes at John Corbin for some reason, because at this point, she still should think he's sus. But she's like, oh, and they're kind of giggling about, look at that guy with his diarrhea from the pickles. What a jerk. And Clark goes off. And when he's flying to Niagara Falls, he ends up, as I said, trying to figure out that idea. I have to do this so nobody sees me, because if this happens, it'll never end. Everybody's going to be doing these stunts and things. So I got to do it. Now, everybody, listening has to try to explain to me, what do people actually think is happening then? Because what you have going on, he shows up as the barrel is going over the falls. So what Superman does is he goes into the falls, into the water, says that I'm like a salmon. I'm going to go upwards. I'm going upstream. And as the barrel's coming, he goes hidden by the water, but sticks his arm out to grab the barrel to then fly up and throw it down the river. And then it lands, it breaks open, and he goes to check. And Sherry Blair, actress, she's fine. She ends up, oh, my God, I don't know what happened. She says, I must have hit a rock, and it deflected me that way. It makes no sense. Of people just sitting there like, oh, man, what happened? This barrel just ended up flying itself up and then way down the river. But that's what they go with. And Superman, rest assured, nobody will continue doing those stunts again. Well, in the meantime, in Metropolis, you end up having what Clark worried about. You have the gangsters go by, drive-by shooting. They're trying to gun down Lois Lane. Luckily, John Corbin is there. He doesn't seem to even jump in front. He's just there and walks in front of the gunfire that deflects off of his metal chest. He's made of metal. Lois sees this and says, oh, my God, he's Superman. I'm in love. Oh, my goodness. And just throws herself at John Corbin, says, don't bother to cover up the bullet holes in your suit, darling. You're Superman, the man I love. And stupid me, I was brushing you off. I'll make it up to you from now on. And John Corbin's like, holy crap, I just hit the jackpot. And then gets this idea of, first off, they go to lunch at the Chinese restaurant. You hear all these reports about Metallo, but John figures out, wait a second, you know what? I am the spitting image of Superman, except for this cheesy mustache. I'm going to get rid of the cheesy mustache, and I'm just going to go around as Superman. I can get the uranium because they also announced, like he was worried about, they're locking down the uranium over at Fort Tabor. So he figures, if I dress up as Superman, I'll shave my mustache, I'll go to Fort Tabor, I'll say, hey, I'm here to check in, make sure that this Metallo guy doesn't come by, and then in the meantime, I'll steal the uranium and get the hell out of there. So he does that. Well, he gets to Fort Tabor, and you have to be reminded that, yes, in fact, Metallo, the metal man, he is super strong. So he goes up to a serviceman and says, hey, what's up? I'm here to protect that uranium from that Metallo. And by the way, look at me. And he picks up this Jeep. Look, I'm super strong. And they're like, man, you are Superman. This is great. And then he just makes a beeline to where they're storing the uranium, doesn't open the door, crashes through the metal door, and then grabs this giant uranium barrel, puts it in his car, and takes off. Now, in the meantime, the real Superman does show up. Superman shows up thinking, okay, I'm going to check on this. This is where Metallo would go. So it leads him there. Oh, my God, two Supermen. And you end up where at first John Corbin thinks that he's going to stop Superman by throwing a bronze deer statue at him. He throws that. Superman just punches it and then uses his super breath to push the car aside and then to push the uranium barrel out of the car to safety. And he's about to take down John Corbin, but then he ends up hearing that there is problems over at this big art exhibit where they're making a big Atlas statue. And as they are putting the Earth down with Atlas, the cables break. And he's, oh, crap, I wanted to take down Metallo here, but I'm going to have to go and save people and this exhibit, and flies over and catches this giant Earth, right? Where in this, first off, the people that are in danger, they're in danger because they're not running away. This is nothing that Superman really had to do. Even so, this Earth isn't that big. It's just a big round stone ball that's just going to fall. They just need to get away. But there you go. Superman has to save them. In the meantime, that gives John Corbin the wherewithal, or gives him the time to go and visit. We get back to the Professor Vale. Thank God he's survived a stroke. He's wheelchair bound now, but he's making a recovery. You end up having John Corbin go back. Hey, Professor, it's me. I'm glad that you survived. I won at this point. The professor to say, no thanks to you. Now beat it, buddy. But he ends up saying, can you tell me this other power source? And you end up having Professor Vale said, why, of course. It's kryptonite. It's something we all would know now. But again, at this point, oh my God, the thing that ends up hurting Superman is what's going to power up Metallo. That's pretty cool. Now, where do you get some kryptonite? Well, you end up, luckily, Professor Vale has some. Now, he had some. Why didn't he just use this right away? He started off the process with just giving John Corbin and his heart the uranium, when maybe he could have used some of that kryptonite, though he does say, I'm using it for experiments because he's trying to help Superman. He actually says, I'm looking into a way that I could find out that Superman would no longer be hurt by kryptonite. I have some samples, but I guess if you're in dire need of them, you can have them. They're over there across the room in my safe. Now, again, you would think, John Corbin, okay, well, thank you. You want to open the safe? You want to give me the combination? No. He runs over and just smashes it at the top and breaks the safe. I want my safe. Why are you doing this? Why are you hurting me like this? But the safe is now destroyed. And you end up having John Corbin. He has a way to power up his body forever. But instead of doing that, he gets a little greedy right away. He decides that he is going to go to and trap Superman in the big Metropolis exhibit hall where they are having a giant memorabilia of Superman exhibit. He's going to, and thinks that Superman will be by to check it out, whatnot. It's after hours, it seems, but you end up where he sneaks in. He's dressed as Superman at this point. So he goes in and he ends up seeing things. There's a fourth dimensional bomb. There is the giant key to the Fortress of Solitude there. There is an interplanetary clock, all this memorabilia. But what he does is he grabs the kryptonite that he got from the professor and he puts it on the piping in the ceiling. He puts it above in the piping and then sits and waits. In the meantime, right where he is, there is a box that says sample of kryptonite. So his plan here is to draw Superman in, and then Superman will get sick because of the kryptonite there, but then he'll grab the other sample of kryptonite, which doesn't make sense because that's there too from Superman, but all this goes around. He thinks that he's going to be able to kill Superman with his kryptonite and then grab Superman's kryptonite and go empower his heart. Superman shows up, immediately gets weak. Oh my God, what's happening? Oh, it's that kryptonite in the piping. Oh, woe is me. And you end up having John Corbin laugh. All right, I killed Superman. I'm the greatest. I'm going to go off. At this point, he may even think that he should get rid of Superman's body to maybe impersonate Superman from here on out and then do sus things. But he just is happy that he has this kryptonite. He goes away and he puts the sample that he got into his chest and away he goes. He thinks that he's set for life. This is great. In the meantime, Superman is in big trouble. He's weak. He thinks to himself, well, I have tried in the past melting kryptonite with my heat vision. I wasn't able to do it, but maybe I can concentrate and do it now. And he does. He ends up melting the kryptonite. It goes away. It allows him then to boom. I'm good to go. And I better go stop Metallo, at this point still dressed up as Superman. So what happens is you end up where John Corbin, again, I think he's getting kind of greedy. He wants to go and, smooch with Lois. So he, as Superman, goes into Lois's apartment and says, hey there, baby, it's me. It's the Supermans. Let's smooch. And Lois says, whoa, what's going on? Because as this was going down, it seems as if John Corbin Metallo, he accidentally ripped his Superman suit going into the window, and now his metal body's exposed. Lois immediately says, you're not Superman, you're Metallo, you're sus, get out of here. And you have John Corbin Metallo about to, beat up Lois. He just falls over. Boom. Probably a clank as he hits. He hits the ground. She's like, oh my God, he's dead. What happened? It looks like he had a heart attack or something, but, he's kind of a robot. What's the gives? Superman then shows up. Oh, my God, thank goodness that you're okay. And by the way, the thing that happened here is this Metallo, he ended up stealing my sample of kryptonite. It wasn't really kryptonite. It makes sense that it isn't. Why would he be taking kryptonite around and putting it in an exhibit? So it was just a green rock. He painted a rock green, and you end up where you have John Corbin thinking it's kryptonite, puts it in his chest, and there's nothing to fuel his heart, and he died. He ended up dying of heart failure, and that's that. He is done. In the meantime, just to make it so that you're like, okay, everything wraps up, and that John Corbin was such a piece of crap, you end up, the police figure out that perfect murder that we really don't know anything about, John Corbin, he wiped off the gun of fingerprints, but he didn't wipe off the cartridges for the bullets, and they had his fingerprints. He's guilty, but he's dead, so it doesn't matter. And then at the end, you end up having Superman laughing at the face of death when you had the police commissioner say, oh, by the way, Corbin thought he'd committed the perfect crime. And then Superman says, I know, Inspector, he was dead wrong. I'm like, oh, Superman, don't go there. And while that's happening, Lois is there still wondering what the hell happened, and maybe should kind of get in her mind not to fall for everybody that she thinks is Superman, when in fact Superman has been under her nose this whole time. There's also a little play that at that Chinese restaurant when John Corbin and Lois went out, she ended up getting a fortune in the fortune cookie that ended up being very prophetic, that ended up saying, neither faint heart nor false heart e'er won a fair maid. And then she's like, oh my God, it makes sense. Boom, 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 done. It's funny. It's fun. It's that beginning of Metallo. It's more of a John Corbin story, but he happens to be Metallo. And even that name is kind of a cool deal, especially because he is a man of steel. And then, he goes against the man of steel. You get it? That's pretty cool. But this idea that he impersonates Superman, then he needs this. He's just completely a jerk throughout. But again, he's a jerk. And by the end, karma did get him. Karma ended up getting him by the very end. And he's dead. And that's kind of that weird play. A lot of times nowadays, you're not going to have a first appearance and kill off the character because then he can't continue. But as we know, you can continue with them anyway, especially a robot man who just needs to fuel up his heart. So later on, I don't know if you realize this, but he does come back. He comes back strong. So yeah, there you go. The first appearance of John Corbin Metallo from back in 1959. Pretty cool issue. And again, the issue had the origin and first appearance of Supergirl as well. So this is a really big issue. And then it had a Congarilla story that may not be so important, but still kind of funny. But there you have it, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed this return to the Secret Origins podcast, something that I really do enjoy. And I'm going to start doing a bunch of these shows that, get us back to some classic stories, things like that. At the moment, we've had some people come and go because, well, they're not enjoying what's currently going on at DC or Marvel. And so I figured, well, let's all talk about stuff where it was great and good and fun. And that's what we'll do, including, the current stuff as that continues to possibly and hopefully improve. So there you go. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will talk to you all later.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.